It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. My guest today is Mikkel Thorup, founder and CEO of Expat Money. Mikkel is the world's most sought-after expat consultant as he focuses on helping high-net-worth private clients to legally mitigate tax liabilities, obtain a second residency and citizenship, and assemble a portfolio of foreign investments including international real estate, timber plantations, agricultural land, and other hard money tangible assets. Mikkel hosts the popular weekly podcast, The Expat Money Show, and wrote the definitive #1 best-selling book, Expat Secrets: How to Pay Zero Taxes, Live Overseas, and Make Giant Piles of Money. A world traveler since his teens, Mikkel has learned his craft in 3 unique and unconventional ways. First, by living it himself, continuously pushing the boundaries, testing new ideas around the globe. Next, from diligent and intense study, consuming over 2,000 books and courses on the subject. And finally, by apprenticing and learning directly from the world's top legal experts in the field. Mikkel is a dedicated husband and father of 2, and when he's not helping clients or growing a 7-figure consulting firm, he enjoys traveling and spending time with his wife and children. Mikkel Thorup, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you so much for having me here, Brent. It's
Yeah.
looking forward to today's conversation. Should be a lot of fun and hopefully educate and possibly inspire some of your audience. And yeah, it should be a really good conversation.
Absolutely. Well, what you do certainly inspires me. As I had mentioned to you before, we're actually, I believe you're in Panama. I'm not too far away in the island city of St. George's, Grenada, where I'm evaluating second citizenship. So
I know,
I think
it's
our
amazing.
conversation, our conversation is very timely, and you and I will have a private conversation about that. But so curious about how you got into this work and what you've been learning and doing, obviously, in that process. I know you've lived in multiple countries around the world. We want to hear all about it. But we always like to start in the beginning and tell us a little bit about your early days, where you grew up and, mom and dad, what they did and your original nuclear family is about.
Sure, absolutely. So for my story, I have to go quite far back in time, but I'll try to keep it as concise as possible. So what happened, Brent, was when I was a child, I was diagnosed with a learning disability. And one day, the teacher pulled me out of class and sat me down in a little room with the principal and vice principal and maybe a resource teacher. And they said, Mikkel, something doesn't work quite right in your brain. And what we want to do is do a special school for special boys. So that's what they did. Every day for 3 years, I got on a little white bus, took a little white bus across town and went to this quote unquote special school.
Now, where was this? What part of the world or country?
So this was in southwestern Ontario. I'm Canadian,
Okay.
born and raised.
Right.
And this was grade 3 when this started. And I was I went there from grade 3 to grade 6. And
Wow. Yeah.
the only problem was it was actually not a special school. It was a regular school with a special class. So you can probably imagine what happened. I got in tons of fights. I got picked on. I got bullied. And it was all around not a fun experience. Now, this is no woe is me, poor Mikkel type of story. Certainly not. I mean, I got hit. I hit back. And I hit back twice as hard if I possibly could. I would never claim otherwise. So I'm certainly not a victim in this by any means. But it did leave a bad taste in my mouth for education, public education. But eventually I got to go back to my neighborhood school. And I was so excited. And I thought, all my friends, they're going to be so happy to see me. And everyone's going to be, curious what happened. And, just really looking forward to seeing me. But once again, you can probably imagine what happened. Showed up first day, first week of school, and everybody starts gossiping and whispering. And
Mm,
oh, I remember Mikkel. He went to some retard school. Oh, thanks,
mm,
guys. Very
yeah.
sensitive. You know how children
Kids
can be so
kids can be
sensitive.
very brutal. Yeah, very brutal.
But like I said, it did leave a bad taste in my mouth for public education. So I
Yeah,
stopped
yeah.
going. And then when I stopped going, I started failing. And then they'd send me to summer school, and then I would fail that. And then somehow I'd get pushed through, and then I would fail again. Anyways, long story short, I stopped going to school when I was 12 years old, and I
Mm,
officially dropped out when I was 15 years old. And I
wow.
started traveling internationally a couple of years after that. And when I
On your
went
on your own,
overseas,
not with mom and
on my
dad.
own.
That was on your own.
Well,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
first one was with my father. I was like 16, 17 years old, but I started traveling solo in my teens as well for, multiple month-long trips in Europe and in North Africa and stuff. But it was amazing when I first started traveling, I started meeting these incredible human beings who were living their lives so differently than anything that I
Mm,
had seen in southwestern Ontario. They
yeah.
learned things differently, they structure their lives differently, and I felt like I really met my people. I met my
Mm,
peeps,
yeah.
and I decided at a young age that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to travel the world and explore and see what this world has to offer, and that's what I've done
A
for.
different educational approach, right? In terms of,
Exactly,
yeah, yeah.
exactly.
What
Very,
did
very different.
mom and dad think about that? And did they struggle as well? I mean, did you have brothers and sisters that maybe had a similar ailment? What were those early years like when you were at home?
Well, it's interesting because my father had told me while I was growing up that travel was the greatest thing he ever did with his life. He had
Right.
backpacked around Europe a couple of months in the 70s when he was growing up, and he would always show me pictures and the photo album and everything like that. But then my first trip overseas as a teenager, I really saw that he was right. Like,
Mm,
travel is an incredible thing and one of the greatest things you can do with your life. And it certainly spoke to me. My only question for him, or rhetorically, I guess, was like, why did he only do one trip? Why did he not continue to do trip after trip and
mm,
trip?
mm,
He did one trip when he was in his early 20s, and then that was it.
yeah.
Well, I wanted to keep going, and that's what I've done. I just keep going and going and going.
That's
So that
awesome.
was my
So,
father. And then
yeah.
my mother has been very supportive. My mother even lives with us now here in Panama, where we are. She lived in the UAE with us
Wow.
as well. She's an
Wow.
expat now. She's been
Yeah.
with us for 6 years with my wife and I.
Wow.
She helps take care of our kids. And so it's nice to have grandma around.
Sure.
So she's always been very supportive of me.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Correct. And brothers and sisters at all? Did you have
Yep, I've got a
siblings that grew up?
brother who traveled with me for maybe 3 years, 4 years. We
Nice.
lived in Australia for a couple of years. We lived in New Zealand together for a while. Um, he's not traveled as much as me, but he's traveled a good amount. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely a
Yeah.
solid amount.
So in those early years, you obviously didn't go right into your consultancy, and we want to talk about that because you do some very interesting things, as I mentioned earlier, that I'm personally interested in.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
what kind of things were what you were doing? Did you kind of work odd jobs? Were you in the service industry, hospitality? Did you work on ships? Tell us a little bit about how you supported yourself during those early years,
Yeah, it
particularly in that
was.
17 to 20, 25 years old
Yeah,
years
it
of age.
was really any type of hospitality job I could do.
Mm, yeah.
I always liked the idea of the geo arbitrage. So basically, I would make
Hmm.
money in one place, and then I could get a good salary or a decent salary, and then I would take that money and I would go somewhere else. So I
Hmm.
worked in the ski resorts, in restaurants and things like that for 18 months, and then I took that money and I traveled and hitchhiked and backpacked through Central and South America for 18 months. Then I
Wow.
lived in New Zealand and Australia. I lived down there for about 4 years between those countries. And every chance I would get, every 2 months, every 3 months, I would go out to the islands in the South Pacific, or I'd go down to or
Wow.
up to Southeast Asia, or I'd visit other parts of Australia and things like that. So
Yeah.
the early years was just save money and travel, but I would never go home in between. I would just continue on. I would just go from one place to another, to another, to another, and just use this, what I affectionately call the hub and spoke model. So I base
Right.
myself in one country and I use that as a jumping off point for visiting close by countries and cities.
And was the home country Ontario, or did that hub move from time to time as you
No, the hub
would?
always moved. So
Yeah,
I left
yeah.
Ontario 23 years ago, and
Wow.
besides a week here or there, every couple of years to see my father, um, that was
You've
it.
never lived there
I've been
again.
pretty much
Yeah,
been gone.
yeah,
So.
yeah. So where have the hubs been? Tell us a little bit about those, and then let's talk about the spokes from there.
Okay, let's see if I can remember everywhere. Well, I won't go into the cities, but I can definitely do the countries.
Right.
So, well, in Canada, I lived in the ski resorts out in Banff and Lake Louise.
Nice.
Then I was in Guatemala for 6 months. I was a year in New Zealand, 3 years in Australia, a year in Singapore. Then I was in the Arctic for 366 days.
Oh my
Then I
gosh.
was in the
Wow.
Middle East. I was in Abu Dhabi for 8 years. We've been in Panama then Brazil. We were in Brazil for half a year, and now we've been in Panama for almost 4 years, about 4 years here.
Wow. Wow. Fantastic. And I'm not going to ask about work permits because I don't want you to get in trouble with any of those past employers. But uh, were jobs fairly easy to find? And if so, how did you kind of go about making those connections when you'd come to a new place?
Yeah, actually, I think everywhere I did have a permanent residency or a permit to
Okay.
work.
Yeah.
Actually, I,
Yeah.
I forgot to mention the United States. I did travel around the States and lived there for a little while.
Right. Right.
Don't tell immigration that about that one.
We'll blank
But
that out. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But the rest of the countries, like when I was very young, there's what's called a working holiday visa. So I was, I don't know,
Hmm.
22 or something like that, and I would
Right.
live in New Zealand under a working holiday. And then I
Right.
did the same in Australia, and then I did a bridging visa. So I did 12 months of working holiday visa, then a bridging visa for a year, and then I did what at the time was called a 457, which was basically a skilled migrant worker visa,
Got it.
and I
Got it.
did
Got
that
it.
for a year as well. And then in
Right.
Singapore, I got sponsored by a company to work there. I worked for Far East Organizations, which is the
Hmm.
largest property developer in Southeast
Yep.
Asia, or
Yep.
was. I'm not sure if they are anymore. This was 15
Yep.
years ago. But most places I think that I've lived, I've had a permanent residency and a right to live and work there.
Yeah.
So.
Fascinating. Well, you're living the life that most people dream about. So, tell us a little bit more about how you did it. I mean, you obviously worked in countries where I'm assuming you probably didn't have the language capability before you went there. Would that be one of the things that you did, that you would go and, study and learn, Brazilian Portuguese, or, any of the Middle Eastern languages, or did you find that your English carried you, and French, I'm assuming, which I'm sure you got your Canadian upbringing, wherever you went? How did you kind of tackle that approach?
Well, it's interesting because actually the majority of the countries that I live in did speak English. So
Right,
Singapore,
right.
although a Chinese city in Southeast Asia, it's 80% Chinese,
Yep.
culturally Chinese. Um, and the rest split between Malay and Indian and
Indian. Mm.
other places, Filipinos and stuff like that.
Yep.
It's an English speaking country. Now they
Hmm.
do speak Hokkien and Teochew and Tagalog and different languages on the side, but most things are done in English. Well, it's the
Right.
same thing in Abu Dhabi. I mean, 8 years I was living in the UAE, and it's a Muslim country, it's an Arabic country in the GCC, but English is an official language there. So although I probably learned a couple hundred words of Arabic in my 8 years there, I didn't need it. I didn't use it at all during my life there. Everything was in English.
Right.
In Panama, I mean, I speak Spanish, so I mean, I
Right.
had to learn
Right.
Spanish when I got here, and
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
backpacked and traveled through Latin America, I picked some of it up then.
Right.
But because I own my own business, I work in English. So I do
English. Yeah.
all my consulting clients are online. They're not here in Panama with me or anything like that. They're not Panamanians, let's say.
Sure.
They're Americans and Canadians and Europeans. So everything is done in English. So,
Right.
I've picked up a decent amount of languages or language, I would say, not necessarily fluent, but around the world. But English has been very, very helpful. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way.
Pretty much the lingua franca anywhere else
Exactamente.
places
Yeah.
you've gone. And what about any kind of formalized other education? I'm sure you obviously learned a lot of your Spanish while you traveled. Maybe you took some courses, but was there anything else that you've taken along the way? Did you stop and take any courses, either from an adult education standpoint or any area of expertise, particularly as it led up to your founding of Expat Money?
Well, so this is an interesting question. I am highly educated in that I have read a ridiculous amount of books, probably more books than than most people have. I read on average about 100 books a year and have
Wow.
done for over 20 years now. So
Mm,
um, I, I I have definitely read over 2,000. I kind of stopped counting a while ago,
right,
but
right.
I've definitely read over 2,000 books. And then um, I learned a lot by being mentored by really phenomenal people, like some of the
Mm,
lawyers that I've worked with throughout the years. Which I've been really, really lucky, and they were just so generous with their time. So I'm very thankful and grateful for that.
right.
And then I did go back and do like online programs, but non-accredited, not go to university, but where they have
Right.
like an online program for law. Like I took some online programs at Harvard for basically law 101 type of
Right.
programs, just so I
Right.
could have a background, but there was no credits for that. There was no diploma. There's nothing like that. That was just in my free time for fun. I just wanted to have a better understanding of some of the things, so I
Sure.
would go back and study that stuff on my own.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
never went back to college. Never went back to university. I am what I describe or what I call a autodidact polymath. So that means that I am an expert in multiple fields and I am completely self-taught.
Excellent. Awesome. And what was the first company that you founded then? Because it sounded like obviously did a lot of that hospitality work as you went around, but when did you kind of have that first motivation that, yeah, I really kind of want to work for myself and I can figure out how to do that while I'm still on the road?
Well, my life is kind of, or let's put it this way, my adult life is kind of broken up into these, maybe 8 year segments, I would say. So probably it was that first 8 years that I was doing, I don't know, whatever random job that I could. Eventually, I got really interested in finance and stocks and equities and things like
Mm.
that, and I self-taught myself this, and I
What
found option
motivated that
trading.
interest? Tell just a
I
quick pause
think
on that
just that I just wanted more money. I just wanted to be a little bit better
one.
off, financially off,
Financially
and
independent. Yeah. Right.
yeah, exactly. And I just got really curious about it. So I started studying equities, and then I found options trading, and specifically selling options contracts. So I did that for probably about 7 or 8 years as well, and made a lot of money and lost a lot of money. Blew up my
Mm.
portfolio a couple of times, which was excellent education.
That's right.
It's
Should be expensive,
geez,
but
very expensive,
you
but
learn the hard way that way. Yeah.
yeah, actually, there's a phenomenal book called "What I Learned Losing $1 Million." I think if I
Mm.
had read that book at the beginning of my career in stock trading, I would have been much further ahead. I would have done much better. I think I
Interesting.
read it close to the end when I was
Yeah.
kind of like frustrated and on my way out.
Right.
But
Right.
then after one of these debacles with blowing up my portfolio, I decided I wanted to get into entrepreneurship. I wanted to build something. I think I was just
Yeah.
at that time in my life where I wanted to create something. And I was really big into fitness throughout my life. I
Mm.
was an athlete, not team sports, but in martial
Right.
arts and
Individual.
skiing and
Hmm.
all these types of things. And I really loved exercise and the mechanics and things. So I think the first thing I tried to do was a gym T-shirt company, which was terrible. And then I wanted to do a supplement company, which was even worse. And then we tried to build a gym as well with a couple of my friends and tried to raise capital for that, which was very difficult. And I don't know, I tried a whole host of things in the fitness industry for a couple of years and was no good at that, or it was just a learning experience, but
Right.
failed at that. But eventually I sat down with a piece of paper and a pen and I really thought about, like, okay, what is it that I'm really good at? What do I really enjoy? And what do I have an expertise in? So I had been working in financial markets for probably about 7 or 8 years. And I had already been an expat by that point for probably about, maybe at that time, maybe 14 years,
Mm. Mm.
15 years, something like that. And during this entire time of being an expat and traveling overseas, I had been, you know, opening bank accounts and doing different residencies and figuring
Right.
out the immigration and the legal structures and the tax implications and investments in real estate and things like that and random countries. And I thought, this is, you know I probably have something important to say here.
Mm.
So when you
Mm.
combine that with my understanding of the different cultures and the languages and the people and everything like that. Anyways, I took the the two concepts and I mashed them together and I
Mm.
created Expat Money,
Mm.
which is my company today.
Yeah. And what year was that?
The company officially formed in 2017.
Right.
Now, I was already doing consulting for a while before that, but we actually, we officially put the company together in 2017.
Got
So
it.
it's 6 years going on 7 years now. And actually, it may have even been a little bit earlier than that, but the podcast started in 2017.
Right.
And yeah, we've
Right.
been doing the podcast very regularly. There were a couple of breaks in between, but we're up at, I don't know, 230 episodes, somewhere
Yeah.
around there right now.
Yeah.
And it's been
Awesome.
amazing. It's been
Yeah,
fantastic.
great. Well, tell us then, a little bit more about the company. We mentioned in your bio, at the intro what you do, but give us again maybe a little bit more of the impetus around, the rationale behind why you founded it, and what's been kind of most interesting in the work that you've been doing in consulting with expats.
Yeah, so actually, the funny thing is, I don't actually consult with expats. I consult with people
Okay.
who want to be expats. So,
Ah, got it.
I affectionately call them expat hopefuls.
Right.
People who are
Right.
living in Canada or the US and they have an interest to move overseas for whatever
Yeah.
reason that might be. It might
Right.
be political reasons, it might be cultural reasons, it might be just they want a bit of adventure in their life and they just want to change. So, what I try to do is help them to, well, first of all, understand the landscape, what is out there, what the countries are like, the culture, all these types of things, and then the legal ramifications of moving to a country and the tax implications and
Mm,
the tax implications of their home country. What are their responsibilities to their home country? And then really work through all of these steps with them, the
mm,
financial, the legal, the tax,
right.
the immigration, these types of things. So I don't deal with helping people put their stuff on a shipping container and moving it to another
Right.
country. I don't deal
Right.
with the
Right.
the relocation. I deal with the
The
more the
planning.
esoteric type of pieces of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
would say really, Brent, at the end of the day, what I am doing is helping give people the courage to do this.
Mm,
um,
hmm.
I am supporting them. It is an emotional journey. Most of my people have never lived overseas. They've traveled. They've
Right.
got an
Right.
adventurous streak, but they've never like left everything behind and moved to a brand new country on the other side
Yeah.
of the world.
Yeah.
With by themselves or with their family. They don't know anyone. They don't know what to expect, and it's this unknown. So I want to be there to support them and give them the courage through it, and handhold with them through it. And it's beautiful work. I
Mm.
truly, in my heart of hearts, in my soul, love the work that I
Wow.
do. Like it's just an amazing feeling,
You
watching
sound
people,
very
because
passionate about it. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
am, like
Yeah.
I really am. Because imagine, I wake up every day, I get to do cool interviews on an awesome show like yours. I jump on Zoom calls, I talk to people about the things, I listen to what their problems are. We create, lists of their likes, wants, and needs, these things that they desire, this life that they want to have.
Mm.
And then I'm like this maestro. I help design things with them, and
Right.
everything, I start with a blank piece of paper and a pen, and I just, everybody's plan is slightly different and everybody's wants and needs is different. But they come into the calls at the very beginning very stressed and their shoulders are up and
Mm.
they don't know what to expect.
Right.
And after a couple of calls working through this process, you can just see their shoulders drop, and
Mm.
they just become very slow and calm, and they're excited, but they're confident.
Yeah. Yeah. Must be
I think
very
this is
satisfying.
cool. It is.
Yeah.
It is really
Super
good.
satisfying. Now, do you have employees that work for you? Do you have consultants that help you in these other matters, legal, financial, et cetera? How do you kind of organize that support for these folks, the
Yeah,
expat wannabes?
I have a beautiful team. I've got 18 full-time employees, so I
Great.
have full-time lawyers who work for me, and
Right.
graphic designers and web developers, and I don't know. Well, I've got lots of people who work for me. I'm the only one who does the consulting. I'm very hands-on with this.
Right. Right.
But we put out a ton of free things at expatmoney.com where, a lot of my staff will help manage those types of things. Like, I very much believe in working my core competencies. And for
Mm.
me, it is writing and it is speaking, so I'm not
Right.
doing any of the tech development or anything like that for my company.
Right.
But I also joint venture with a lot of other lawyers and work side by side with them. So I have a Canadian tax lawyer that I work with on maybe not a daily basis, but at least a couple times a week. We're on calls working through clients together. Um, Same with my American tax lawyer and some of the American CPAs, which is really nice as well because then any of the information is still all privileged. The client still gets all of the attorney-client privileges because everything is signed off that I'm an official
Right.
representative of the client. So the lawyer can speak to me about these things. So sometimes we get on and we'll discuss the tax implications or the legal implications. And I really I quarterback the entire team because
Got it.
you can imagine, you're moving to a new country. It's not a one person job. I mean, you're going to need the immigration lawyer for the country you're moving to. You're going to need the tax lawyer of the country that you're leaving. You're going to need to have a place to live. So we're going to need a developer.
Right.
There's probably service providers involved. Sometimes we're doing citizenship by investment. Actually, often we're doing citizenship by
Yep.
investment. Like you
Yep.
mentioned, Grenada.
Right.
Grenada is a
Yep.
fantastic country. St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda. So we have representation in these countries that we work
Right.
with, and partner with a lot of other firms to really make it a team mission to help the people.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. What's the typical kind of age demographic profile of your clients?
Well, so for my private consulting, I work exclusively with high net worth individuals. So
Okay.
my sweet spot is kind of that $2 to $10 million net worth range.
Right.
Now, I do have a client at the $70 million, and I've got another one at $150 million, but those are kind of outliers. As for ages, it's kind of that 50 plus, 50 to
Yeah.
65, 70. Although I
Empty
do have a,
nesters, kids are grown,
yeah,
now I
and
want
then
to
I do
make a
have some
small
clients who've
venture.
got young children. I have two
Mm,
young children myself, so I'm sure that that plays a big part. Like I'm very family orientated. All my work is very family orientated. So I
right.
have, 30 somethings and, 40 somethings with kids, but real go getter type of people. And then those people that are just not quite at that level, that's okay as well. Because as I said earlier, there's just a ton of free content on our podcast, on the Expat
Yeah.
Money Show, or blogs, or webinars, or newsletters. And, I probably give away 90%, 99% of my work for free. But it's that, the one on one time is what I charge for. And that's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
the higher net worth people.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. And what were, you say some of the biggest challenges you've had as you've set up this company? I mean, it's been 6, 7 years, or you're kind of beyond that initial startup phase. You've got 18, 20 employees. But, I'm sure there was some growing pains in the beginning, particularly, that you've been moving around a lot. And I assume you've been in Panama for the last 6 or 7 years, right? So has the company been founded since you've been there, or
No,
did
so
you
we've
actually
been in
found it before?
Panama for 4 years
Oh, for
now,
4 years.
almost
Okay.
four
So it
years.
was
Yep. So
prior to, so you even moved the company from place to place, during the time
correct,
that you've had it
correct.
set up. So tell us a little bit about that. How's that early days went? Was it all success from the very beginning and made money from day one? Did you have some early challenges that you can share with us? And if so, what were they?
Well, the beginning, I think, is really just trying to find out the exact niche because I mean, I
Mm,
didn't create a company with a widget and I'm just selling a widget.
right.
I mean, I'm selling really highly specialized, highly detailed knowledge base that not many people have this level of information. So
Mm,
there's some other people who do similar type of work that I do, but they're not really competitors. I mean, we do different things. We take care of different people.
right.
It's a totally different business. So I guess the early problems or challenges were trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to do and how I wanted to structure the things, who I wanted to help, my
Yeah.
tribe, like we talked about
Right.
earlier.
Right.
So that was kind of, throw something at the wall, see if it sticks, and then kind of go from there. So I've tried many different ideas, but eventually I found a real formula, especially for the consulting, which really works well. How I bill for it, the time,
Mm,
the the process, my proven process for working with people through this, and the steps and everything that goes into that. And it's been a bit of trial and error,
yeah.
but it's like a well-oiled machine at this point. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's really good. Yeah.
And is the podcast kind of a business development opportunity for you? Do you get business through that? Has it been more kind of, as you said, that 99% of information sharing? How do you kind of develop your clientele?
Well, okay. So in a business like mine, where I am dealing with very personal matters
Sure,
and very emotional matters of a client, it is unbelievably important that they know me
sure,
and like me and trust me. I mean, that's the old adage, know, like, and trust, right?
right.
Well, I don't think there is a better medium in the world than podcasting to help accomplish this.
Hmm.
So, every single Wednesday at 6 a.m., a podcast comes out, and it's me and a guest. Half the episodes are me, half the episodes are with a guest, talking for an hour to 2 hours about an individual subject and going really, really deep. But in a
Hmm.
lot of the episodes, there's a lot of my personality in there as well. I talk about
Right.
my family and my wife is from mainland China and my kids were
Wow.
born, my daughter was born in the UAE, my son was born in Brazil, and we travel almost every month to a new city or a new country. So all of these types of things, I talk about the business, and my business is doing very well. It's a seven-figure business, so I talk about what goes into that and my work schedule and the micro and the
Hmm.
macro of how I set up my life and the success. And when I mess things up, I put that in there as well. So,
Vulnerability and humility is important, no question about
well,
it.
it
Yeah.
is, and it's transparency.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
need to know that you're a real human being, that you're not infallible, that you're doing the best you can, and and add to all of that, they want to know where you stand philosophically.
Mm,
They want
sure.
to understand what your belief patterns are,
Right.
your ethics, your morality. So that all shines through very, very well on my podcast. You listen to some
Yeah.
of my episodes, and I think you'll have a very good understanding of who I am. And so when I start working with a new client, they feel that from the beginning. And
Right.
I'll give you another example. We are doing my 40th birthday coming up very, very soon. Uh,
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And we've already got about 100 people confirmed that will be flying in from all over the world. I mean, I got
Oh,
people flying in from New Zealand,
wow.
Thailand, Portugal, England, Ireland, Colombia, Brazil, obviously all over the United States and Canada. And people do that because even though they may have not met me in person, they've listened to the podcast and they've heard me or read my newsletter every day. I put out a daily email
Sure.
for the last 8 years. Even before I started the podcast, I was doing the email newsletter. So people feel like they really know you. And then all
Yeah.
of my
Yeah.
clients, lots of Zoom calls with them, and it's just a great opportunity to meet people in real life. So that's the
That's fascinating. So these are clients as well as I'm sure family and friends that are coming for your 40th from around the
yeah,
world.
clients and subscribers. Some of
Yeah,
them
and
I've never
subscribers.
met
Awesome. Never
before,
met. Yeah.
but
Fabulous.
they feel comfortable enough to get on an airplane and come over here. And the
Yeah.
great thing is that I will take care of them, and they're going to have an amazing time, and they're going to meet so many other wonderful people from our community. And I love that. I think it's just the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, that's awesome. That sounds like a lot of fun. You're obviously have hired people over the time, and of course, we work in the recruiting world, so we always like to ask questions around kind of decisions on that. What do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invested and hire at Expat Money?
Well, you know, talk about a subject where I have made many mistakes in my life. This is not an easy one. You really think that you would just be able to go out there, post a job, and just get someone great. You kind of think that they will have this love and devotion for your business like you do.
Right, right.
It's really not the case.
Yeah.
I think people are just so distracted in today's day and age, and they're just all over the place, and um, a lot of people just don't care. I think there's a lot of fraudulent people out there in the world as
Mm,
well. They say
unfortunately,
they're going to
yes.
do something, or they say they have the relevant experience and background and they don't. I think that this is becoming more apparent with remote work.
Right.
People working, people getting two or three full-time jobs and
Yeah.
then just doing the absolute minimum to
Quietly
keep the
quitting the
job.
other ones. Yeah, right.
Exactly, exactly. This is really scary stuff.
Yeah.
What I have found works really well is, first of all, I'm am front and center with my belief patterns. I am very freedom minded. I am very liberty minded. So I put that absolutely at the center of all of my job postings, that I'm
Right.
looking for someone of the same. So I will talk to them and I will ask them kind of leading questions and, kind of understand what their philosophical mindset is. This is not a
Mm.
political thing. This is a genuine ethics type of thing. Do they
Right.
understand, things like the non-aggression principle and stuff like that?
Mm.
And then from there, what I do is just a trial period, just a very, very simple. I'm going to throw you in the deep end.
Yeah. Let's see
Let's
how it
see what
goes.
happens.
Yeah.
Um, and and that's it. Most of the job positions in my company, actually pretty much all of them, at one time or another, I've had to do them myself.
Right.
So
Right.
I have learned, although I might not be a world-class web developer or IT specialist or these types of things, at least I know how long it should take and what needs to go into it. Same with like graphic design. Like I know if a project should take an hour or it should take a week.
Right.
So I can kind of watch from the sidelines and see how they perform. And then I just see how they interact with my other staff. I mean, all of my staff, save one, is remote.
Mm.
So we just use a very simple solution. We have Telegram groups for each one of the different projects that we work on. And then we've got a Trello board that, we define all the pieces of the project. And I have a business manager who I hired, and it's just his job to keep the rest of the staff
Organized.
occupied and organized. Yeah. And that's what's worked for me over the
Yeah.
years, but that's
Yeah.
been a lot of trial and error.
Awesome. Awesome. I feel like we've just barely scratched the surface, but this has been very, very interesting, but we're almost out of time. But we always ask one last question of our guests. And, that's kind of what career and life advice would you have to someone who, maybe wants to have their own company someday or become an entrepreneur and, run their business internationally. What would you say to those folks?
Well, I think that there is a couple of things, but I'll try to keep it very concise. The first thing is that you will make a ton of mistakes and you will screw things up and you will lose a lot of money. And that's awesome. You're supposed to. Like, no one said this is going to be easy. Don't expect to hit a grand slam home run, your first time at bat.
Right.
This,
Right.
yeah, you have to go through all these things. You have to suck at first, okay?
Right.
That's the important thing. Anything you do in life, it's important that you suck at first and that you work through it, because eventually you will not suck. At some point, you will just be average,
Right.
and then after you go through it a little bit longer at being average, you'll be okay. And you have to go through all these phases, to get really good
Iterations.
or
Yeah.
excellent,
Right.
and those are important stepping stones. Now, there are ways to shortcut it. I truly believe that reading and self-education are absolute shortcuts, especially reading and studying and mentoring from real people who have done real things. I want to learn business from someone else who did business, opposed to,
Right.
a prof who, read about it in a textbook and is
Yeah. Yeah. Teaching
regurgitating rote
principles. Yeah.
stuff
Right.
that they learned.
Yeah.
I want real people who built a business, scaled a business, multiplied a business, sold a business, blew up a business. I mean, all of these types of things. I think those are great people to work with.
Yeah.
But at
Yeah.
some point, you need to jump in and you need to do it yourself.
Right. Right. Well, terrific advice and counsel. Mikkel Thorup, founder and CEO of Expat Money. Thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.